Good afternoon. Thank you all for staying so late. The topic, can cultural buildings be green? Now, perhaps that's not quite the right question, right? Because the two cultural buildings that I will be talking about, the Hong Kong Palace Museum, as well as the East Kowloon Cultural Centre, after all, they have obtained provisional gold rating in the BEAM Plus version 1.1. So the real question perhaps we should ask is, can cultural buildings be green enough? Why? Because, frankly speaking, design priorities for cultural buildings are often at odds with those for green buildings. Let's take a look at, for instance, a museum. Now, for all green buildings, we would like to optimize natural lighting, natural ventilation. We would like to integrate greenery into the building, both the outside and the inside. But the priority for museums has to be the protection, security of the exhibits. Natural lighting? No way. Plants indoors? Plants, artificial plants, okay, by all means. Real plants, what about the bugs? No. For performing arts building, similar. We're always looking for reduction in energy consumption. We're looking for possible adoption of MIC construction. But every room in a performing arts center is different. Different heights, different size, very stringent dimensions. And the most important thing for performing arts centers are audio-visual standards, very stringent, that enable performances to be presented in the best light to audiences. So, how could we have that balance? How could cultural buildings contribute? First of all, let's look at the Palace Museum. Just a short history of the design concept. It is located at the western end of the West Kowloon Cultural District, as, in a way, embedded in the urban fabric of the district. So it's the western end of an east-west avenue, stretching from the city center from the east, all the way past Central Square Avenue, Arthur Square, and then towards the Museum Square at the western end. It echoes the grid and the texture of the district. It's integrated with the open space around it. And it is compact, and it has to go vertical, because we need to preserve the amount of open space that the Western Kowloon Cultural District has to provide by law. So the design concept, you may have heard this before, but I'll repeat it, is actually summarized by an incorporation and a reflection of three cultures. First of all, the urban culture. Now, you've seen how the museum is integrated into the district, which means it has to, like all Hong Kong buildings, be very compact, efficient. It has to go vertical as much as possible, and it has to be responding to its immediate context, which in Hong Kong is varied and diversified. Now, that goes to any piece of good architecture, reflecting the urban culture. But this is the museum that would display artifacts from the Palace Museum in Beijing. So it has to be an integration of our traditional visual culture. Not meaning that it has to resemble anything, but also because it has to recall the attributes of our traditional visual objects. The attributes, not the physical attributes, but the metaphysical, like the poise, the balance, the uniqueness of the colors and textures, and the subtlety in the glamour. At the same time, it also reflects our traditional spatial concept, as reflected in our paintings, in our calligraphy, and of course in the architecture, which is the poetry in its layering and the fluidity in the spatial sequencing. So we stacked up actually 3 atria in the building. And because of Hong Kong's unique urban context, each atrium is oriented towards a different direction. The lowest atrium is oriented towards the east, all the way looking at City Centre. The central atrium oriented towards the south, looking at the Hong Kong skyline, and the top atrium towards Lantau, looking at the west and the sunset. Now, whether the result actually recalls for most people the attributes of our traditional visual culture is entirely up to the individual. Luckily, this is not the subject of today's presentation, but it does embody a continuous sequence of space that entices people to visit, to go in and explore, even though the galleries are 5 stories high, stacked up one on top of the other. So what are its green credentials? I think this image tells all. First of all, as I have said, this building is compact. It has a minimum physical footprint, meaning that we could release as much as possible open space, green space around it. So that has to be one, to me, major feature of green buildings, making best use of our land resources. The second attribute you could see is there's a high ratio of wall to window area. That's by necessity, because most of the galleries need solid walls to protect the artifacts on the inside. So it's a very good insulation value. The third is the skin. The skin is detached from the concrete inner shell. It helps, therefore, to conserve energy by reflecting the sunlight, diffusing the sunlight. But it's one also a very interesting role, which is that it could help to diffuse and absorb the noise, which is generated once in a while in the art park. You look at this analysis diagram. This is actually the noise that radiates out from the rock concerts, the festivals held in the art park every now and then. It actually affects even the peak. I don't quite believe it, but that's what the expert told us. So our skin wrapping around the museum actually helps to reduce, diffuse the noise. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it helps. So these are some of the green attributes. But some, like introducing natural light within viewing gallery spaces inside the exhibition galleries, which is a concept we presented in the concept stage, that's not successful. Right now, they put black curtains all around the entrances. So when you're inside the gallery, probably you couldn't find these galleries because they couldn't allow even the slimmer of natural light into the gallery. We want to turn the top atrium into a green space with trees, lily pond as a place of tranquility and contemplation. Again, that's a non-negotiable. Can't have it. Although I observed that in the Beijing Palace Museum, they have planting and greenery right outside, in the courtyard, outside the galleries. But no, sorry. So these are the things that we can't do, even though they are standard features of any green building. But we manage, of course, to protect, conserve the valuable exhibits. And the other thing we can do, of course, and we always try to do, is provide a good spatial experience for visitors. An experience that not only attracts people to come in and explore the spaces on the inside, but hopefully to make them come back for another visit and another visit. And that's contributing to the cultural sustainability of the museum. Now, you could look at it or appreciate only through a video moving through the spaces. It starts with the access. The museum entrance actually reveals itself, much like what happens in Beijing, but in a different way. And you enter through the central access, and here you are conscious of a room, which is a living room, and you are drawn upwards visually and spatially. And then you arrive at the southern atrium, the central atrium, looking at our skyline across the harbor. This is our present. And then looking back, we are aware of another space stacked on top. And it becomes a space which could be used for all sorts of activities. And it's not a serious space, it's a fun space. And it's in these spaces where we could introduce as much as possible diffuse daylight. And then you go to the top atrium, and you look at Lantau in the west. And that represents our future. So we managed to create a spatial experience for visitors that has the following attributes. Shifting locations would present shifting views. 布夷景遷, which is a traditional Chinese landscaping concept. Interplay of light and shadows, 光影流動. So you're always aware of the time, the prevailing weather, the season, and most importantly is the juxtaposition of space and time. 時光交錯. Meaning that after you immerse yourself in the galleries with thousands of years of history to absorb, every now and then you could come out to the atrium and regain contact with the present and the future. So it's a museum that becomes a place where you don't just get to appreciate things, but it's a museum that provokes and inspires, that you could think about where we were and what direction we should look forward to. And that contributes, in our mind, to cultural sustainability. Now, the East Kowloon Cultural Centre is, of course, very different. The main piece of function inside is a 1,400-seat theatre, a 500-seat flexible theatre, and dance studios, theatre studios, black box theatres, and so forth. Now, all these, as I said, require stringent environmental, technical performances, but the theatre is situated in such a way that its sustainability surpasses a mere provision of features like photovoltaic panels, water recycling, or sun shading. It's situated in an area where it could start to regenerate the whole district. Because the old district, on the one side, is Duck Folk and the MTR station. On the other side, however, is the colorful old neighborhood. Markets, street stores, arcades. So the necessary functions are located, but what we provide is a circulation system penetrating and wrapping around these functions that allows people to pass through it on a daily basis. So the green arrow are the routes for anyone, whether they're interested in the arts or not, to go from the MTR station to the old neighborhood on the other side. And on their way, they would be in contact with news of culture or activities in various areas. At the same time, people who use the facilities, represented by the red arrows, could go to the destinations without being interrupted, especially during the events, because there's a level difference that allows the two circulation to intertwine, for people to look at each other, but without disturbing each other. And this is all housed in a transparent enclosure with optimum lighting, with fluidity of space, that allows people to have contact with the surrounding urban environment on their way to the different destinations. And we even managed to allow or create pockets of ground level activity areas. So if we look at the plan, for people going to the performances, they would simply go from the MTR station through the footbridge into the two theaters. But people going home to the other side could go down a stair, pass through, go down a stair on the central, and then they could pass through some of the exhibition areas, and then emerge onto the ground level pocket spaces on Gok Road. People going to Ham Dat could also go up the stair instead of going down the stairs. On the left-hand side, the stair takes you up to a route. You could then cross the road by a future footbridge, linking to the shopping arcade across the road. And then on your way, you could see and feel the activity pocket spaces outside. People going to the functions other than the main theaters could go up either side through stairs to the dance studios, black box theaters, rehearsal rooms, and other functional areas that can be used by the community, by the schools, every day. So the idea is to create a performing arts center which is not a white elephant, because most performing arts centers are white elephants, unfortunately, that are full of people on the day where there are performances, but completely dead the rest of the time. Even for famous institutions like La Scala, Paris Opera, it's the same. But what we want to do here is to enhance and sustain community life all around it by bringing people through it, around it, every day. by making the city more walkable with the architecture is, to me, a very green gesture. KS talked about green transport. To me, the greenest transport is by walking, because it discourages the use of motor vehicles, and thereby must reduce carbon footprint. So it is a performing arts center which is very much part of the urban fabric and very much part of the community. So maybe the question that we should ask is, can cultural buildings contribute to sustainability? And the answer is definitely yes. But that sustainability, in a way, would include more than just environmental sustainability. It would be urban sustainability, social sustainability, and cultural sustainability. Thank you.